Development Seminar. My name is Marty Whitfield, and I'm one of the assistant directors with the City of Phoenix Parks Department. Also a longtime NFBPA member. I think this is my 20th year in the organization. So as Marcus Coleman said during our Marks of Excellence, if you are not a member, please join. So today's session is called Welcome to Crucial Conversations, When and How to Have. This morning, I read extensive bios on both of our panelists, but in the effort of saving a little bit of time this afternoon, I'm going to have each one of them introduce themselves, maybe talk about some positions that they've had on the way to their current position, educational background, if they'd like to do that as well. So let me start all the way down to my left with Marshall Franklin.
Yeah, you're up, Carol.
So good afternoon, everyone. We've been having a little fun up here, and we hope to have fun. The last session was really good if you were in here in terms of it's okay to not be okay, but it got a little somber in here. So we're going to try and lighten it up a little bit. So as Martin said, I'm Marty. I'm sorry. I know him as Martin because I have a Martin. Anyways, work for the City of Phoenix, serve as the Human Services Director. My bio's in the little app, so you can take a look at that. But what I'd like to highlight about that is that and I share this just because I think it'll tie into as we're talking through, this is my 35th year of being in the professional work environment, and I've had a career that I never planned. So I started out one way, was going to be a data entry clerk. I had my son at 19, needed a job. So ASU had a data entry clerk, and I was trying to get benefits, just being real. Freshman year in college. So I took this data entry clerk position, was in that for a little bit. Then it was chasing the dollar. So it was another job for another quarter an hour. It's just being real. And so I went to this other job. They said, well, we wanted to hire you to do this, but we don't have the system anymore. But oh, by the way, we have an HR clerk position. Would you do that? Well, I needed a job, had a son, needed benefits. So yeah, I'll do that. Little did I know, 15 years into that, left the private sector as a human resources executive. And then the opportunity presented itself to come to the City of Phoenix. Again, had no idea that my 20th year in the city will be next month, that I would have been here 20 years. I thought, you know, I'm coming from corporate America. What am I going to do in local government? Time to make the donuts, blah, 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 blah. You know, corporate America, we flow and move. But the man above always has different plans for you. So I've been fortunate in terms of my public sector career to work for about 18 months as a chief of staff for councilman. It's my entry road into the city. Spent 8 years working for the former mayor and left as his chief of staff. I transitioned out to the airport. For those who know, City of Phoenix owns and manages Sky Harbor and 2 general aviation airports, and did government relations and community development. And then I got a call to go to the police department. And I was like, not just no, but no. But then city manager and then assistant city manager, Milton Dehoney looked and Milton said to me, there are times when I've taken some career paths that I never thought, but they helped me to get where I'm at today. So I go over to PD, spend PD, a couple of years there as a civilian equivalent of assistant chief. And then it was time to come and be the human services director. And so that's where I'm at here. So that's been my career. I have a graduate degree from Grand Canyon University. So my MBA in finance. So go Lopes, if you all don't know, that's what a Lope is for Grand Canyon undergraduate degree. And then the final thing I'll close out in terms of me, because I love my sons, I call them my handsomes. So I have 2 sons, one's in corporate real estate and one works for Phoenix PD. So that's me. That's my story. I'm trying to learn to live life like it's golden, to embrace life now that they're grown and old and productive. Their rooms are no longer their rooms, so they can't come back, and just trying to embrace life and to try and be real. And for purposes of this conversation, be real so we can have courageous conversations. So that's me.
Thank you, John.
So if you want if you want the flavor of this presentation we're about to give, that was longer than her bio, just so we're clear. So I'll try to make up some time here. I grew up in Michigan, went to the University of Michigan undergrad with a business degree, actually in HR. Came out to Arizona to go to law school at Arizona State University. People ask me why, and I tell them at that time it was the cheapest law school in the country. $1,800 a year.
Wow.
And it wasn't the 60s, folks. I'm not that old, okay? But it was $1,800 a year. Became a prosecutor. I actually started my career as a prosecutor at the City of Phoenix. Got to know Ginger next door with the City of Phoenix when she was running the Advocacy Center and I was a prosecutor. and got the chance to go work for Governor Hall for a couple of years. And then I went to Mesa as the city prosecutor and eventually moved over to be the assistant city manager, overseeing departments like police, fire, human resources, basically anything bad that happens in the city of Mesa, you see in the paper, it's my fault. All right, so let's just go there. All right. So I think that's a little bit shorter. So I think I'm one up on it already. All right.
Okay, thanks, John, for taking one for the team there. But we heard from both of them on some of their other positions and where they are now. So what inspired you to work in public service, and what has continued to motivate you to continue your career? So let's start with John.
So the beauty of this conversation the second time around too is the answers changed a little bit. And what I mean about that is, you know, I got to hear the previous presentation when they were talking about some very heavy topics. So I'll tell you, my core beliefs come from my parents. My dad was a school teacher, he was a high school teacher. My mom was a career Girl Scout, and I learned public service through them and remember stuffing envelopes at United Way when I was 5, 6 years old, thinking that was a good way to spend a Saturday. You know, that is part of it. But the other thing that really inspires me from a leadership standpoint and a community service standpoint is you hear about some of the things people go through. And you hear about things like terms like I just learned about what code switching was in the last thing and what code switching was. And that varies as you go through your career. And someone at my level within the city of Mesa, my job is to be as real and authentic as I can be every single day to let people know that's okay. And one of the things that inspires me to do my job is to sit in front of groups like you and say, you need to be real. And yes, that changes depending on the time, and we still all code switch, but it's okay for everybody to do what they say, and it's okay for everybody to be authentic. And if I was being authentic back to my Michigan roots, I'd have said everybody. So that's about what we're saying. All right, just saying.
You know, there's a song to go, everybody got.
Yes, I know. Okay. I got a flask that we can talk about later.
I got the rum, so we're good to go.
There we go.
So I'll make my answer short. Thank you very
nice
much,
job.
gentlemen, to keep it short and sweet. So I fell into public service. As I mentioned earlier, I firmly believe that I have a faith walk. The man above has me where he wants me to be. And so wherever I land, that's where I'm at and that's where I'm supposed to be. And so I embrace it. What resonates with me about public service, because I could go back to the private sector if I wanted to make a whole lot more money than potentially you do when you work in the public sector, but it really is about making a difference. So John mentioned about his work when he was a prosecutor, working with victims of domestic violence or survivors of domestic violence. And so in the Human Services Department, in spite of what our beloved city manager said earlier about me and Titus, Housing and Human Services, we both were messing with each other. It's really about, you get to see a difference at the end of the day. You're helping those who are most vulnerable in our community, and you're creating systems so that they can be sustainable and healthy and whole. And so that's what keeps me going, is we in public service are really making a difference in improving the quality of life and ensuring that we've got stable systems that we all want to live and work and play in that are healthy and whole.
Okay, good. Let's talk a little bit about mentorship and how important it is. I'm certain each one of you have had mentors as you've worked your way up the government ladder. Tell us about one or two mentors and what they taught you. We'll start with Marshall.
Sure. So the one mentor I'd mentioned, I talked about it earlier, his name is Marty Vargas, and Marty and I are still very close friends to this day. That was in my 20s. I was working for Marty, and she really took the time to mold and mentor me. She took the time to pull me aside and say certain things like Shelly. They call me Shelly. It's cool to wear those big earrings and have your hair going and to be you. And to be authentic you, but also know that in being authentic you, there's spaces that you go in that folks are going to make some judgments about you being your authentic you. And in them making their judgments, if it has the ability to minimize the message you're trying to deliver, whatever that is, then you just may want to think about how you bring your authentic self in certain work environments. So she taught me that. It exists to this day. And then the other thing she taught me was, and it served me well in corporate America, and it served me well here in the city, that you make sure you triple check your work. It's nothing worse than getting something wrong. And when you do work, you put your name on it and you own it because it represents you. So.
And for me, I will tell you, I've had some very good mentors in my career, and probably one of the best was when I graduated from law school. I left a sales job. I back in the early 90s, I sold beepers, okay? Beepers, all right? I made a lot of money selling beepers. It's ridiculous how much we charge for beepers, all right? And I went to law school thinking, I was the LA law generation, thinking I was gonna make a lot of money being a lawyer. and then end.
We have a member dash 911 and what, that was an emergency, you pull over. What do you need? Oh, I just want to see what you're doing there. Okay. Work relationships are so important. How do you effectively build work relationships? This kind of job?
I think one of the hardest part about work relationships is you can't be effective.
I've been on India
You can't be
the whole
effective at work
time, and
without
like it
building
just went,
relationships with people around you and building that trust.
and so
And yet, as you move up in an organization, you have
I
a
just
job.
changed it to
And
over
so
to that.
drawing
and
that
I picked it
line
up. I was
building
gonna change it
effective
and change it back
relationships,
and see if
trust
it
and
worked, but it
friendship
just
that happens.
started working when I
And
changed.
making sure the people that you have that with understand when push comes to shove, you're going to do the job. This is about difficult conversations. There's nothing more difficult than going in to have a negative conversation with someone who used to be your peer. All right? Who used to be your friend, who you used to go to lunch with every day. All right. And you know what happens as you move up in an organization? You start eating alone. All right. Because you've got to draw that line. And it's a very difficult balance because that trust is really important. And those relationships will get you through very difficult times. Right? You don't get through a pandemic in the last 2 years without having some friends to work with. Right? That's the truth. Right? But you still got a job to do. So as you go up, you want to have those difficult conversations, you're going to have people understand when push comes to shove, I'm going to deliver the message. And that's really important if you want to be respected, to deliver it from your lips, with your own eyes, face to face. And most of you, if you're here for the morning, you met my boss, Chris Brady. One of the things people in Mason will tell you is they've never heard me say, Chris said. Once I've got a job to do, it's not my job to say he did that. I own it, I do it, I look people in the eye and I have that conversation. Why is that important? Because if I'm gonna say Chris said, he doesn't need it. And I'm not doing my job. So it's that balance of relationship and doing your job that becomes very difficult as you move up and you eat a lot of lunches by yourself.
I say relationships, when it's important to have them, especially when you get to the point where you have to have those courageous conversations, whether it's up or down or across in terms of courageous conversations. So what I try to do in terms of relationships is to find something where there's a connection with an individual. It could be something as simple as a pair of shoes. I mean, that's yourself. And to think about our shoes and create that connection with somebody else in the room and create a connection a different way. But you create a connection, whatever that connection is. So the next time you connect with that person, you've got something to build upon. I talked a little bit earlier about the relationships are important in the work environment. Boundaries are also important in the relationships in the work environment. So it's establishing relationships so that you can build trust, so that people can see the authentic you, show up all day, every day, so that when you get to the point where there have to be these courageous conversations, whether they're with the individual that you have the direct relationship with, or if there's someone where you may not have a direct relationship, but they engage with someone which you do after you had to have the crucial conversation, then that individual in which you developed a relationship is able to say, well, yeah, Marshall had to have that conversation with you. Then she was coming from a space of genuineness, and she was coming from a space of really trying to make sure you are the best that you can be, or helping you be the best that you can be, or helping you to understand that maybe this is not the place for you to be your best you. You need to go do that somewhere else. So relationships are important. Building them are important. Making sure you have boundaries in your relationships is important. But again, I would just say for me, I find a commonality with someone, and I always try to make sure I'm greeting everybody and saying hello, whether you're the CEO of the organization, whether you're the city manager, or whether you're the person who comes in every day that cleans the toilets that we use. Everybody needs to know that you value them, that you respect them. And to me, that's just how you build relationships. It's little connections that at some point in time build and grow, and you're able to leverage those or rely upon those when you have to have some crucial conversations.
And those connections aren't hard. What do I mean by that? Have elevator conversations. I mean, in City Mesa, our tallest building is like 8 stories, so it's not a long elevator. Just saying, all right? But anybody that works with me knows I get on the elevator, I never stop talking. Why? Because I want to get to know the people that work for it. I want to develop that bond. I want them to know when they need something or when they're uncomfortable with something, they can say something to me. If I stand on that elevator and I don't say a word and I just stare straight ahead, nobody's going to talk. All right? And if nobody talks to me when it's that casual conversation, who's going to bring a problem? Right? So those are the little things. It's just that positive energy, that power that you bring to the table to break that ice, to have that conversation, to open that dialogue so they feel comfortable talking to you later. And they last forever. I mean, I haven't worked for City of Mesa for, wow, it's been, I want to say, I left in 2001 from the City of Mesa, so 21 years. I still consider Corey. I got to know him when he worked in the courts and I worked in the prosecutor's office because we took the time to talk to each other.
Okay, why are we here? Crucial conversations. You just indulge me just real quickly before we dive into a question. A mentor of mine by the name of Carl Newman. I was in human resources, which is kind of funny. Now that I think about it, they used to call me the Terminator. I was the aviation and I'm always laughing and joking. There was one gentleman that worked in operations. He was getting passed over for position after position. I got tired of that. He was taking up staff time, and I told his supervisor, "Hey, send Mr. So-and-so up to my office." I said, "Mr. So-and-so, if you don't like working here, get yourself a dozen donuts and the one ads and find yourself another job." 5 minutes later, I get a call from Carl Newman. And right, Marshall and Corey will know this. If Carl asked you to sit at the table, you knew that you were in trouble, right? He said, "Close the door, sit down." He said, "What did you tell that man?" I said, "Well, Carl, I'm tired of, taking up staff time." He said, "Young man, if you don't learn how to talk to people better, you are going nowhere in this organization." So that was the first crucial conversation I had. I tell it all the time. Whenever I see him, we still laugh. So thanks for listening to that. Two-part question. Let's start with Marshall. Tell us about a professional, crucial conversation someone had with you and why the conversation was so important.
So I shared this morning, I'll share again. So going back to Maury, who was someone that I worked for, but also continues to be a friend and remain a friend. So I was 20-something years old, human resources, and an employee came to me. Long story short, I heard this story and I was like, okay, I'm here to go check the executive vice president of the organization. And I'm human resources officer, 25, 26 years old. I'm going to go check the executive vice president about what she should have done. So I was stomping myself in there. Remember I said I'm an errand zone. I know I'm right because I'm an HR and HR is always right. So I go into the executive vice president and I tell her what she didn't do and what they needed to do, and what her team didn't do, and how this person was mistreated, and woo woo, and I laying it all out. And she looks at me and says, "Okay." So I sashay on out, back to my office. And I'm like, "Carl Newman, Shell, come in here." This is Marty. I'm like, okay, she's going to congratulate me. I just did checking the executive vice president. So I roll in there, do my little thing. I sit there, my little paper, like here, and give my little kudos. And she said, "Shell, did you know this and this and this? And did you know this and this and this about the situation? Did you know this and this and this?" So this big me, thinking I'm handling the business, goes from to like here. And so the crucial conversation that she had with me was, Shell, I need you to know that before you go off checking people, make sure you have all your facts. And so we talked through that. It's a lesson I carry with me to this day. I went back and I apologized to the executive vice president. And I shared earlier, thankful that she was very gracious with me. And she understood and she said, you know, I'm always here, but I wanted to make sure you knew that the way you came at me is not the best way to handle your business. And if that's the way you're going to continue to come at people, even when you're right, even I wasn't right in that situation, but even when you're right, you're not going to get far with that. So that has stuck with me to this day. So what that crucial conversation taught me and why I was glad that Marty, it was not easy for her to have that conversation with me. I know, because my little feelings were hurt. She could see it in my face, because I thought I had done a good job. But it's carried me to this day to know that before I go into a situation, make sure you know as much as you can know, and then give yourself space when you have to have those conversations, but you give yourself an out. So I can be 99 and 19% sure about something when I go into a conversation, especially when it's a crucial one. But I always give myself a 1% for just in case there wasn't something I knew. So I use different words now based upon my understanding, or based upon the facts that I've been able to gather, X, Y, and Z, or here's what I'm perceiving, or here's what I'm hearing, so that I'm still able to speak the truth, but I also give myself that little bit of space and out, because you never know 100% of everything. You just don't. And so, tough conversation. I thought I was getting kudos, and it was quite the opposite. But that's been 30 years, and I still remember that conversation to this day. And Ileana was the executive vice president, but I called myself checking. It was gracious, and so I see her face as well. So that was a blessing for me that I got my first good gut check early on, and it has carried me through my career.
I was a young prosecutor with the city of Phoenix, and I had the pleasure of prosecuting predominantly domestic violence cases. And I loved it because I felt like I was the champion for people who generally didn't have their voices heard. I tell you that because it makes more sense when I tell you that I would go into the courtroom and I didn't want to just do justice. I didn't want to just win. I wanted to rip the other attorney's leg off and beat him over the head with it, all right? And let everybody in the courtroom know how bad I was winning that case. So one time, fun for a minute, not always productive, but finally a very good defense attorney pulled me aside one day and he said to me, it can't always be this way. You can't always humiliate the other side. You'll never get anywhere. You've got to do it. You got to find a different way to do the exact same thing. And why that translates into my job today is now the entire goal of going into a meeting is letting the other side feel like they want, even if you get what you want. Right? When you help other people get there to the point where they believe they have gotten a successful meeting out of it, and you get what you need, and they don't even need to know that, you've won. Right? When you can leave a room and it's a win-win, you've won. Right? And as much as I liked making sure everybody in the room knew I won, I was a much better attorney when I started figuring out the fact that if I leave the room and everybody thinks they won, they're going to walk back to that room in a much better frame of mind than that. I've carried that all the way through my job as an assistant city manager, is the importance of there are better ways to get to yes.
You were like a strong safety with a big hit and then walking over.
Yeah, 5 strong. Yeah, we had 5'7" strong. All right, maybe 5'6", but who's counting?
All right, John, let's look at that question a little differently. Tell us about a professional, crucial conversation you had with a subordinate or colleague. Why the conversation?
So within the city of Mesa, as an assistant city manager, obviously I get to make a lot of decisions. And one day, one of the department directors who'd been there a very long time, and I actually worked with her husband, who had been assistant police chief at one point in time, came to me and said that she was very concerned about something because it seemed to be that a lot of the positions within the part of the organization I oversee, you had to be a friend of John. And if you wanted to promote, you had to be a friend of John. So it came down to, hey, if John likes you, you get where you want to be. If John doesn't like it, good luck. All right. And I'll tell you, it's a code switching moment too, because my first response to that was say, oh, that's bad. Oh, you're right. I should change that perception. And then I started to think about it. And we teach a leadership class in the city of Mesa where I speak for an hour and a half to brand inspiring leaders. And I started asking the question, what's wrong with you? Why is that bad? Okay? If it's for the wrong reasons, because you fit the suit the way I want you, or you look the way I want you, or you say nice things to me, then I got a problem. All right, but if it's because you work hard, you get your job done, and you're really good at what you do, and you have a positive attitude, why is it a bad thing? And I started putting that question back to people. Why is it a bad thing? Why shouldn't it be? I'll give you I have a director, I have a woman who, you may or may not know, the person who oversees our benefit department, our personalities do not match at all. All right? We would not be friends at all. I watch her in meetings and I just want to go and drink from the flags, Travis. I'd be as real as I possibly can. Drives me crazy. You know what? I will do anything in my power to keep that woman working. Why? Because she is a rock star. Because she is awesome at what she does. What I tell people is that when it comes to leadership, that's the all-star power forward here. As a leader within an organization, you've got to be able to develop that relationship with someone that good and realize your personal feelings don't matter. The job she does warrants my respect for what she does, and just go drink with Travis afterwards and leave her alone, all right? Because she's good at what she does.
So I'll say fairly quickly, it was a conversation I had to have. This time, John earlier talked about courageous conversations, how they're somewhat challenging, but a little different when somebody that reports to you. But it's a little more challenging when it's someone who's your boss or colleague. So I thought about when I went to a colleague. I remembered everything he said, including Bloody Mary stuff. So let me use one about colleague in relationships, because we're not needing to have courageous conversations with those that report to us, but we have to have them sometimes with folks who are colleagues of us. And so this is when I was in the police department. And one of the things I said when I came to the police department was I wasn't going to be pro-police or anti-police. I wasn't going to be pro-community or anti-community. I was always going to stand on truth. So wherever truth was at, that was what I would speak. And so I have a very tough conversation with a fellow colleague. And in the police department, there's just a culture. When you're sworn, it's blue, it's family. They all come up through the ranks together. Not as much as fire. Fire, y'all a little bit different. Y'all are nice. Y'all come, you say, messing with my brother from Mesa who works for the fire department. And my brother over there also who works for Phoenix Fire. But all that to say that, me being a civilian, being someone who wasn't sworn, didn't come up through the ranks, having to have a conversation with someone who had 25 years on about something that they were doing that was creating an issue and a conflict for individuals that were on my squad. So I did supervise sworn and non-sworn. And so it was challenging for me to have that conversation. But first I had built relationship, going back to what we've talked about, because I always try to show up and be authentic in my space. When I came to the individual, I said, first I have to have the conversation. This is not easy for me. So I acknowledged it was not easy to have the conversation. But if I'm going to be true to the organization, if I'm going to be true to why I was asked to be here, but more importantly, if I'm going to be true to myself, I have to have the conversation. So I led the conversation with that. This is not easy for me to have the conversation. And then we had it, and we had some kind of healthy debate, if you will. There was no screaming. There were no 4-letter words, even though in PD, y'all like law enforcement like to use little 4-letter words every once in a while. But all that to say, genuinely, I was able to have it, one, because of relationships. So taking the time to build relationships is important. But secondly, always coming from a place of authenticity, but also owning the feeling that you have about having to have the courageous conversation with someone who's a colleague, and the risk that you're taking in doing that, so that hopefully the individual recognizes that I'm doing this because I'm coming from a space of caring. And hopefully you receive that I'm coming from that space. And so I will say to this day, that individual, we call ourselves Ebony and Ivory, because he's white and I'm Black, obviously Black. But I say that, I know, I could pass a little bit, huh? I can't pass. You know about passing. If not with school, I'm passing too. I can't pass. But I will just say it was because I tried to come with my authentic. I made him blush. See, I got you.
I'm pretty sure I'm getting in trouble for this.
Both of us are. Both of us are. So that's what I'll say about courageous conversations: is lead from a place of truth, lead from appropriately your heart, and hopefully that the end of the conversation, you both can walk away feeling there's dignity and that there was a spirit of what's the word I want to use? I think genuineness about having to have the hard conversation.
Okay, thank you. Marcel, you mentioned you have two kids who I know very well.
My
Yeah,
handsomes.
your handsomes.
My handsomes.
So
Mhm.
let's start with you with this next
Okay.
question. Work-life balance is very important, but also a challenge when you are in management. How do you achieve work-life balance?
So I said earlier, you do that by shopping at Total Wine and More. So that's why we had this conversation about
that's how
that.
I got to Bloody Mary.
I'm a
okay?
rum person. I'm a rum person. So that's how we got to that. So I don't know if I believe in the notion of work-life balance, honestly. And it's not because there's alcohol that you can drink to help numb sometimes, honestly, some of the challenges, especially over the past 2 years. But I don't know how you create balance work and life. So, I always say to people, when you leave home, I can't turn home off. So whatever's happened at home, the minute I walk out the door, I'm not turning it off. And when I leave work, I'm not that good sometimes at turning work off. So to say, how do I balance work and how I balance life? I don't think there is. I think you just have to get to a place and space where you recognize, okay, I've been giving to work now 10 hours a day for the past 6 weeks. It's time for me to say, nope, today is Wednesday, it's 3:00 in the afternoon, or it's Friday, or it's a Monday, and I'm not going to get to the office until 10 o'clock, and I'm not going to do anything. And that creates my balance. The other thing is that for most of my son's life, they're now healthy, whole, and productive, amen, on their own, can't come back home. Bedrooms are gone. I've converted all of them, so yeah.
How can I get there?
You know what, look,
How can I get
you know
there?
what, bro, you get there, you get there, you get there. So they know they can't come back. They can come back home anytime, but they know mama's not trying to have them come back home. I love my space. But in any event, I say all that to say, though, that for both my corporate career and my career with the city, I basically was mom and dad. And that's not to disparage father in any way, shape, or form. It's a whole set of dynamics going on about that, but it was me. So there were times when I had to drive because I had to make sure we had a roof over our head, we had food in the belly, lights were turned on, they had cars, they had clothes, you were paying for tuition, all of the things that you have to do. And so sometimes it got out of balance. And so that's where I relied upon the village to say, help me, because right now work's got to have more of a priority right now than personal life. Now, for me, it's gotten to the point where I'm starting to make more of my personal space my priority. I'm starting to say, I'm going to reclaim certain spaces as it relates to work that are just going to be sacred to me. So long answer, short answer, now that I've kind of gone on, I just want to share the background behind that is that I don't know if we need to hold ourselves accountable to being and saying there's a balance between work and life. It's a matter of saying, okay, I know for this season it may be this, but for this season, I've got to be very conscious about making it this, or I've got to say in the day, I know I've got 12-hour day that's going to have to be dedicated to work. So how do I carve out in 12 hours, even just 30 minutes where I'm myself? Take off my shoes, put on some music, put my feet up on the desk, close the door, and rock some Jill Scott or, I don't know, Grandmaster Flash, if we want to go real old school, something I don't know, I'm thinking. So I would just say the answer to that is I don't know if there's work-life balance for me. I don't think I've ever really had it, but I give myself space to know that I just got to know sometimes it's not a balance and it's okay. And then to figure out how you create those spaces for yourself where you can continue to nurture yourself and charge yourself.
So I think most of us know that this was the end of work-life balance, okay?
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
literally, two of the big departments I oversee, police and fire, I go to bed at night, and I told the previous class, this sits 6 inches away from my head because I don't want to wake up the whole house for it to ring, and I want to hear it. And nobody calls me at 2 in the morning and say, everything's great, go back to sleep, okay? If they ever do, somebody getting fired, all right? That'll be a critical conversation that I will enjoy, okay? But I think this makes it incredibly difficult. So I'll give you two of the techniques I try to use. One, anybody who knows me knows from about 3:30 to 4 in the morning to about 6 in the morning, I'm at the gym, and leave me alone unless you absolutely need me. That's my time. It's my time to be with myself. It's my time to focus on myself. That's recharging both for family and for work. That's just that one focus time. And then the other thing I will tell you is I think it's really important sometimes to be in the moment. And if that requires you to put that phone down, be in the moment. All right, put it away. Because guess what? As you said last time, all right, I walk out of this conference, somebody didn't like what I said, and they run me over. Guess what? Come Monday morning, the city of Mesa is still going to keep right on going. All right, it is, somebody's going to do the work. Somebody's going to keep going on. So I am not all that. All right, that's just what you got to come to, is you got to understand somebody will step up and replace you, and they will move on. So sometimes put everything else away and be in the moment. whether that's by yourself, whether it's with your family, whether it's like an event like this.
Mhm.
All right, I'm on airplane mode right now because I want to be in the moment and enjoy what I'm doing right here, right now. That's one of the best things you can possibly do.
Yeah,
Right,
that's good.
right. Good point. And John knows he's gonna have 77 messages when he takes it off that airplane mode, so.
Why weren't you answering my text?
So folks, we have about 8 or 9 minutes for questions, but before we open it up, give our panelists another round of applause. They were spectacular.
And Martin for
Oh,
facilitating.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
Shared this time. You didn't share last time. I like that.
Oh,
You had that was a good conversation.
The folks that know me, they know I rarely shut up. So, all right, look, you got- my man Corey's got a question.
Okay, so when I came in, I was right. This is dangerous. We've been drinking and he's on the plane. So, but I did have a question. Because me and Marsha had this experience recently. How do you have that crucial conversation with someone who you know is probably not going to receive it well, or you may think they're not going to receive it well? How do you do that? Because I went to her with the same question. Like, how do I don't know.
So she's already answered for you, either that or she didn't. Now you're asking me,
we
right?
I'm trying to get I'm
conversation.
trying to get a different perspective.
So I think one of the things about crucial conversations, we talked about a little bit more last time, is the setting in which you do it first off. All right. And I prefer to do it not in my office. I prefer to do it in their space. All right. I like to go to them. All right. So it takes a little bit of the edge off, whether it's their office, a conference room nearby, it's outside, someplace where they're a little bit more comfortable. Because if you get in Mesa, if you get called at the 7th floor, people are not happy.
Yeah.
All right. Something's gone wrong. They're not happy. So I try to do it to level that playing field just a little bit. All right. And then for me, I think one of the things we do is we do too much prep work in terms of worrying about that. Right? Look the person in the eye. Tell them, here's why this is what we need to talk about, and we need to have this conversation. And make no mistake, folks, when it comes to crucial conversations, I can remember having them, but I remember mostly how the person responded. All right. And that will shape that individual's career. All right. When I worked for Governor Hall, I was the deputy general counsel. The governor called the judges who got the appointments. Guess who called all the people who didn't? All right. And everybody knew. So I'd call and they go, "Oh, John, I'm really sorry to be talking to you." But I'll tell you this, after the phone calls were made, you know what we did? The governor got the general counsel and myself in the room and said, "Okay, how'd the calls go?" And if they were rude, discourteous, got upset, they never got back to the office ever to be considered again. So, Corey, what I tell you is, especially when you know they're hard or they're not going to be well received, you got to do it in as much empathy and compassion as you can, but you got to deliver it directly. Look them in the eyes so they understand at least they were respected enough. And as I told the previous group, never on phone, never in text, never in email. Okay. If you got bad news to deliver, even if it's you didn't get the job and you work for the city, look the person in the eye that did it. Nothing worse, in my opinion, than the city employee getting a letter from the city saying they didn't get the darn job. All right. That stuff kills me. All right. Because that's our employee that we're dealing with. I'm getting a little bit passionate here. All right. But we have got to treat our employees better than that. So that's the best way you do is with respect. And if they don't handle it well, then the reason you're having the conversation is probably valid.
And then let me add a little bit, Corey, and I know what he's talking about. One of the things we also talked about is when you have to have courageous conversations, sometimes you have to reach to trusted people that may know the individual as well to say, help me understand where maybe they could be, or, here's what I'm trying to communicate and articulate. And that person may know, well, if you use those kind of words, those are trigger words for that individual. Maybe you want to think about this. Or sometimes it's maybe I'm not the best person to deliver that courageous conversation. And maybe you strategize to say, maybe it needs to come this piece of it over here. And then I may be delivering this piece over here. Or I'm delivering over here. And maybe the other person knows at some point very organically, they come back behind just to do a check-in. So that was one of the things we talked about as well, is sometimes you have to reach out to others to maybe get a feel, especially when it's colleague to colleague sometimes. To help kind of frame it and shape it. But to what John said, it is very important to be eyes on and to engage and to be real about it.
And that's very important in larger organizations because make no mistake, within the city of Mesa, I have a reputation.
No.
So I walk into the room and that person thinks X.
Yeah.
So if you don't connect with them and sit and talk to them and do it on a real level, you're already at a disadvantage. All right. Because they believe you're going to be a certain way based on what they've been told you're going to be. All right. And the larger organizations, that's so true because there's no way I can know every employee that works for me. And yet if I got to deliver bad news and that's the first conversation they were having with me, I'm at a disadvantage. So the other thing, you want critical conversations to be good, get out there and meet the people in their space when it's not a bad conversation.
Right.
So the first time they deal with you isn't when you're coming to, for lack of a better term, drop the hammer. Because that's never fun and it's never effective, but that's the only way they know.
Next question. Who's got another question?
We have a question in the chat.
Okay.
John may have touched on this already, but I don't want to overlook the virtual attendees. The question is related to best practices for managing conversations with very strong, different opinions.
Wow. Once again, I mean, especially when you're dealing with the strong-willed individuals, setting is going to be a huge part of it, but how you start it out. Look, if you're going to deal with a strong-willed individual and you're going to make it a competition, it's on. All right. If you're going to do it and be true to somebody. Let's just assume Corey has a strong personality and I walk into the room and I'm going to ask Corey what he thinks and I'm going to get his side whole time knowing what I'm going to do and say. So he goes through everything and I go, yeah, well, here's what we're going to do. You know what Corey thinks walking out that door? Then why the heck did you ask? All right. So be real. If the decision's already been made with a strong personnel, lay it quick. Let me tell you exactly where we're going. Now, people don't always take that well, folks, but it's one of the most consistent things you can do because, you know, if it's truly up for grabs, then have the conversation and let the wills play out. But if that decision's been made, look them in the eye time, the decision's been made. They may ask why, tell them why, and move on.
The only thing I would say to that is that, in addition, I was listening to you talk, John, I would say that you just have to be straightforward with people. I always tell people, you may not always like what I have to say, but I hope you can understand and appreciate what it is I'm trying to say. So I would say with somebody who's strong, I believe direct is the best approach. If you dance around it or tee around it, it's not going to turn out well. And then you just speak the truth. And then again, you hopefully person understands. And you know, sometimes a piece, if they don't, well, you step back and say, well, I can't help you, help yourself. So I've delivered the message and you're going to feel how you're going to feel. I'm here to finish and continue to talk through it, but you're going to feel the way you're going to feel. I've done my best to approach it. I keep my open door for you to come back if need be, but sometimes you have to let people, especially if they're strong-willed, kind of own their strong-willedness and say, that's not mine to try and fix and manage through and to get you to where you need to get. I've delivered what I've needed to deliver. If you want to be a hard head, we got a saying, a hard head makes a soft badunk-a-dunk. So,
I mean, with all
know.
due respect, that works so well too, because it translates to life too, folks.
yeah.
I mean, my ex-wife used to ask me, where do you want to go eat dinner? And I'd say, this place, no, this place, no, this place, no. And then she'd tell me where we were going to dinner. And I used to go, then why did you ask? All right. Now we may have. But it plays out in all aspects of your life. There are times to be very direct when the decision's always been made, and there's a time for conversation. Know that time, and people will really believe you when you say you want to hear their opinion.
John and Marshall, thank you again for both sessions. Before I forget, the folks that have helped with the IT and audio, thank you to you folks as well. You know, audio and IT is funny. It's like it could work for 364 days in a row, and one day it doesn't work, and then people are calling your
I
name.
need to print something.
Right, right. So thank you. So, all right, that's it, folks. Thank you, and have a great day.
You did a great job.
Oh, I don't know. It's good meeting you.
We need to figure out when we go have that.
We gotta have it.
It's